There's a moment right after you see the flashing lights when your brain cycles through 1,000 bad ideas. Most of us have the good sense to discard them. But some people, some brave, beautiful idiots, decide to grab the worst idea and shout it directly at a person with a gun and a ticket book. We've gathered 101 of these moments of genius. These are the craziest things Americans have actually said to the police. Let's get into it. 1. Yeah, I got a gun in my butt. An officer in Louisiana probably wasn't expecting that answer when he asked a suspect if he had any weapons. There was no follow-up question. There was just a long, heavy silence as everyone in a 5-foot radius mentally processed that sentence and the logistical nightmare it implied. 2. A man in a business suit gets pulled over. Instead of handing over his license, he presents a laminated card and smugly declares, "I'm not driving. I am a free man, traveling upon the land." It's the sovereign citizen's favorite magic spell, one they believe paralyzes law enforcement with its sheer constitutional power. The officer's response? That's great. Now the man traveling upon the land is getting a ticket. 3. Let's go to Florida, where a man was caught red-handed throwing a live alligator through a Wendy's drive-thru window. This isn't the setup to a joke. When the cops finally cornered him, his explanation for this act of reptilian chaos was simple and profound. I was just teaching him a lesson. 4. An officer in Arizona pulls over a guy for erratic driving and asks him to walk a straight line. The man stumbles, sways, and then looks at the cop with genuine frustration and complains, "This line's defective. You guys need to get this road fixed." The officer, without blinking, keyed his radio. "Dispatch, be advised, the white line on Main Street appears to be compromised. Use caution." 5. Sometimes the excuse is so pure in its stupidity you almost have to admire it. Pulled over for doing 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, a woman in Minnesota explained with total seriousness, "I just left the car wash and I was trying to blow dry the car." You can't even be mad. That's just next-level eco-friendly thinking. 6. You can't make this stuff up. An Ohio officer stops a car that's been weaving across 3 lanes. He walks to the window to find a man in the passenger seat, pointing a finger at the driver's seat where a small cat is sitting. The man looks the cop dead in the eye and says, "He was driving. Talk to him." 7. An officer finds a suspect with a bag of drugs in his pocket. It's an open and shut case. But the suspect has an ironclad defense. He shakes his head and states with absolute conviction, "Officer, these are not my pants." A bold legal strategy, suggesting his real pants are at home, drug-free, and very disappointed in him. 8. Cops in Colorado bust a guy for burglary. They catch him inside the house, holding a TV. His alibi was not one they were prepared for. He claimed he found a Craigslist ad listing the property as a free house. He wasn't stealing. He was just an enthusiastic, early-arriving bargain hunter. 9. Picture a man in Georgia, clearly intoxicated, trying to convince an officer he's fine. The officer asks, "Sir, have you been drinking?" The man scoffs, puffs out his chest, and slurs, "Officer, I'm not drunk. I'm just advancing in life backwards." It's not a DUI, it's philosophical time travel. 10. A patrolman in Texas, questioning a suspect about a recent assault, gets a confession, just not the one he expected. The suspect leans in conspiratorially and whispers, "Okay, I did it, but in my defense, he looked at me in a tone of voice that I didn't appreciate." The officer just slowly blinked, probably wondering how you even begin to write that down in a report. 11. My car has a medical condition. It just drives fast. That was the dead serious explanation a man in California offered for doing 90 in a 55 zone. He said it as if the officer should be writing a prescription for his Honda Civic, not a speeding ticket. Some cars leak oil, apparently his leaks pure velocity. 12. A Missouri police officer arrested a man for trying to use a $20 bill with Abraham Lincoln's face clumsily glued over Andrew Jackson's. When asked about the laughably bad counterfeit, the suspect simply sighed and admitted, "Look, man, I'm just not very good at this." The honesty is almost refreshing, isn't it? 13. Have you ever been so committed to a lie that you surprised yourself? A woman in Idaho, caught shoplifting a steak, told the officer she wasn't stealing it. She was just taking it outside to compare it to the sunlight before buying. Yes, because the quality of beef is best judged by its UV resistance. A true culinary innovator. 14. Picture this. A traffic stop on a deserted road at 2 a.m. The officer asks the driver if he's been drinking. The man, a grizzled farmer in his 60s, leans out the window, looks the officer in the eye and says, "Son, I'm so drunk, I can't even see the problem." The patrolman reportedly just shook his head and radioed for a tow truck. 15. When a Florida patrolman allegedly found cocaine on a man's car dashboard, the man had an explanation that defied meteorology. "It's not mine. The wind must have blown it in through the window." The officer, without missing a beat, replied, "Sir, I've been a cop for 20 years. The wind has never, ever blown that hard." 16. Cops confront a man in a Whole Foods who is stuffing expensive cheese into his jacket. Without missing a beat, he adopts the air of a political revolutionary and announces, "I'm not stealing. I'm performing a public service by liberating this oppressed artisanal Gouda from its bourgeois prison." 17. There's a certain genius in utter simplicity. A deputy in Nevada pulled over a car moving at a snail's pace. The driver, an elderly woman, rolled down her window and cheerfully asked, "Am I being arrested for driving too sexy?" The deputy was so thrown off he let her go with a warning to, drive less sexy. 18. Imagine being the cop who pulls over a guy with an 8-foot python resting on his dashboard. The question isn't why, but what do I even say? The officer cautiously asked what was going on. The driver's response? "He's my co-pilot. He's great with directions." I have so many questions and I don't want the answer to any of them. 19. I'm not resisting arrest, I'm just allergic to handcuffs. A man in Oregon shouted this while actively wrestling with 2 officers trying to cuff him. He seemed to believe that if he just repeated his allergy claim loud enough, the police would have to offer him a less allergenic alternative like a nice velvet rope. 20. The officer just stared. He had found a man trying to pry open an ATM with a crowbar. When confronted, the man dropped the tool, put his hands up and said, "Thank God you're here, officer. This machine just ate my card." You have to admire the pivot. From felon to victim in under 3 seconds. That's talent. 21. Ever tried to bribe a cop? Here's a tip. Don't. A man in Chicago trying to get out of a DUI offered the arresting officer $50. The officer sternly reminded him that bribery is a serious crime. The man's reply? Okay. What about $20 and half a sandwich?" 22. A woman caught with a bag full of stolen cosmetics tearfully explained, "I wasn't stealing. The universe told me they were a gift from my spirit." The arresting officer listened patiently before saying, "Well, the universe is about to tell your spirit it has a court date for shoplifting." 23. A rookie cop in rural Texas pulls over a truck for a broken taillight. He asks the driver, "Sir, do you know why I pulled you over?" The old-timer behind the wheel leans out, spits, and says, "Because you got held back in high school and this was the only job you could get?" You can almost hear the sigh from the veteran officer training him. 24. A woman in Minnesota, caught shoplifting, confidently hands the arresting officer a get-out-of-jail-free card from a Monopoly set. When the cop just stares at it, she leans in and whispers conspiratorially, "It's a legally binding contract. Parker Brothers said so." 25. A man, arrested for public intoxication, was asked for his name at the police station. He puffed out his chest and declared, "My name is not guilty." The booking sergeant, without looking up from his paperwork, replied, "All right, Mr. Not Guilty, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you start now." 26. All right, put yourself in the officer's shoes. You pull over a car for illegally using the carpool lane. You look inside and see a guy driving with a full-size, fully dressed mannequin buckled up in the passenger seat. When you ask what's going on, he replies, "She's my emotional support person." What do you even say to that? 27. A classic from the bodycam archives. An officer in Pennsylvania asks a suspect, "Is there anything in your pockets I need to be worried about?" The man, with a look of genuine concern, replies, "Just a tiny turtle. Please be careful with him. He's shy." The officer paused, then very gently continued the pat-down. 28. During a raid on an illegal distillery, federal agents cornered the owner. Thinking fast, the man grabbed a jar of his own moonshine, took a huge swig, and then dramatically spit it out, yelling, "Good heavens, I'm blind! This stuff is poison!" A valiant, if transparent attempt to discredit his own product to avoid charges. 29. Sometimes it's not a lie, just a spectacular overshare. Pulled over for speeding, a man in New Jersey frantically explained, "Officer, you have to let me go. My wife just left me for my best friend and I'm trying to get to his house before they, finish celebrating." The cop reportedly just said, "Son, I think you're already too late." 30. These aren't my drugs. They belong to the pants. This wasn't a joke. A man in Tennessee told police with a straight face that the pants he was wearing, which he had admittedly stolen earlier that day, came preloaded with illegal substances. He was just the unfortunate victim of criminally inclined trousers. It's a bold defense, we'll give him that. 31. That's not a gun, it's a hairdryer, a man yelled at SWAT officers during a tense standoff in Arizona. He was holding a black pistol-shaped object and seemed genuinely offended that they'd mistake his styling tool for a weapon. One officer reportedly shouted back, "Sir, drop the hairdryer very slowly." 32. Here's a question for you. What's the worst possible thing to say when caught with stolen goods? A woman in Oregon apprehended with a cart full of unpaid groceries looked the officer in the eye and defiantly stated, "The sign said 10 items or less. I have more than 10, so that rule doesn't apply to me." 33. A cop in rural Kentucky pulls over a speeding pickup truck. He walks up and the driver, a young guy, just blurts out, "My girlfriend told me she was pregnant and I'm trying to get to the state line before it becomes my problem." The officer, a father of 4, just laughed a deep, weary laugh and said, "Son, that problem follows you." 34. Caught stuffing his coat with electronics, a man in Wyoming calmly explained to the police, "I'm a time traveler from 2256. In my era, this technology is worthless junk. I'm basically a historian." The officer just sighed and said, "Great. Let's document this historical event at the station." 35. During his booking, a man covered in glitter was asked for his occupation. He proudly declared, "I'm a dragon." The sergeant started typing, then paused and asked, "Okay, but what do you do for money?" The man hissed, "I hoard gold and protect my lair. Is that so hard to understand?" 36. During a DUI stop in Tennessee, an officer asked the driver if he knew the alphabet. The man confidently said yes, took a deep breath, and began singing the alphabet song, completely out of order, ending with a triumphant, "Now you know my ZYXs." The attempt was so cheerful and so wrong, the cop couldn't hide his grin. 37. A man in San Diego was arrested for trying to pay for a $70 meal with a hand-drawn picture of a spider. When the police arrived, he argued with genuine passion, "That drawing is worth way more than $70. I'm a famous artist." Can you even fathom that level of self-confidence? He was not, in fact, a famous artist. 38. I'm not driving drunk, I'm just dodging the potholes. That was the excuse a man in Philadelphia gave after swerving across 4 lanes of traffic. The arresting officer, a Philly native, nodded sympathetically and said, "I get it, but you gotta dodge them sober like the rest of us." A rare moment of civic unity. 39. An officer in Florida approaches a car parked in a fire lane. The woman in the driver's seat rolls down her window and says, "It's okay, officer, I'm a Scorpio." The cop just stared at her, completely baffled, before replying, "Ma'am, I don't care if you're a fire truck icon, you can't park here." 40. A man caught breaking into a vending machine had a truly next-level defense. He told the police in Seattle that the machine had been taunting him all day with its delicious snacks. He wasn't a thief. He was simply defending his honor against a provocative and unreasonably delicious bag of chips. 41. What would you do if you were caught with someone else's credit card? A woman in Texas chose chaos. She told the officer, "This isn't stealing. I'm a financial Robin Hood. I take from the rich and I keep it because I'm poor." The officer reportedly just replied, "Well, now you're going to jail." 42. In a moment of pure genius, A man trying to talk his way out of a public intoxication charge in New Orleans told the officer, "You can't arrest me. I'm legally a ghost." He claimed to have a certificate. The police did not ask to see it. They just arrested the man and presumably his spectral form. 43. A cop pulls a guy over for running a red light. The driver's excuse? "My dog, who is at home, told me in a dream last night that all the lights would be green today. This one must be broken." The sheer layers of that excuse are a work of art. The cop's response was just a long, tired sigh. 44. An officer finds a man passed out behind the wheel of a running car. He knocks on the window and the man wakes up, looks around in a panic and says, "Was I driving? Oh, thank God. I thought I was still at my desk at work." The relief in his voice was so real, it was almost convincing. Almost. 45. "He started it," a grown man yelled, pointing at a squirrel, after being arrested for throwing rocks in a public park in Colorado. He insisted to the officers that the squirrel had looked at him disrespectfully, and that he was merely standing his ground against woodland aggression. Think about that for a second. 46. Caught with marijuana, a college student in California had an excuse that was both scientific and spectacularly dumb. "I'm not smoking it, officer. I'm conducting a botanical experiment on the combustion properties of certain leafy plants." The cop just shook his head and said, "Experiment's over, Bill Nye." 47. A woman in Chicago, arrested for keying her ex-boyfriend's car, had a simple justification. She told the police, "He changed his relationship status on Facebook to single before telling me." It was an appropriate, pre-approved response. She seemed to believe social media etiquette was now legally binding. 48. An officer in rural Mississippi stops a driver and asks him if he knows how fast he was going. The man leans out and says with a proud grin, "I don't know, but I was making damn good time." The officer just couldn't stay mad. He wrote the ticket, but he was laughing when he handed it over. 49. Pulled over for a DUI, a man in Arizona tried a truly desperate move. He looked at the female officer and said, with what he thought was charm, "If you let me go, I'll name my firstborn child after you." She replied, "Sir, my name is Kevin." The silence after that was probably worth the price of admission. 50. "I wasn't trying to rob the bank," a man explained to police in Idaho after they tackled him mid-heist. "I was just trying to make a withdrawal, and I forgot my ATM card and the bank was closed." He said it with such earnest frustration, as if the police were the ones being unreasonable here. 51. A man in Oregon caught trying to use a stolen credit card had an explanation that was almost spiritual. "The card isn't stolen," he insisted to the officer. "It just followed me home." As if the piece of plastic had little legs and a loyalty problem. The cop just replied, "Well, now it's going to follow you to the station." 52. "I'm not drunk. I'm just speaking in cursive." This line was delivered with the utmost sincerity by a woman in Georgia during a field sobriety test. She then proceeded to stumble in what can only be described as a cursive walk. The officer was so stunned by the creativity, he actually had to turn away to hide his laughter. 53. What's your go-to move when you're caught? A man in Texas, found with a pocket full of someone else's jewelry, immediately dropped to one knee, presented a stolen ring to the female officer, and proposed. He was apparently hoping that love, or at least extreme awkwardness, would conquer all. It did not. 54. A cop in rural Montana pulls over an ancient, beat-up truck going way too fast. He asks the elderly driver for his license. The old man squints and says, "Son, I don't have a license. I lost it 30 years ago for a DUI." The cop, exasperated, asks, "So you've been driving without a license for 30 years?" "Oh heavens, no," the man replied. "I only drive when I'm drunk." 55. I wasn't trying to escape. I was just jogging us away from you, very quickly. A suspect in Florida shouted this over his shoulder while being chased by police. The commitment to maintaining his cardio routine, even in the midst of a felony arrest, is something to behold, isn't it? They eventually helped him cool down, in a cell. 56. A state trooper finds a car neatly parked in a ditch without a scratch on it. The driver, completely unharmed, explains with wide-eyed sincerity, "A ghost deer ran out in front of me. It was transparent. but so majestic. The trooper's official report simply noted the cause as driver was spooked. 57. Imagine being the officer who has to write this down. A man arrested for fighting in a bar in Wisconsin explained the situation like this. He said my aura was beige, officer. Beige. You understand, I had no choice. The level of spiritual indignation was so intense, the other guy almost looked guilty. 58. An officer in Ohio stops a man for walking down the street wearing a live snake as a scarf. When questioned, the man indignantly replied, "He's a service animal. He helps with my anxiety." The officer, trying to keep a straight face, asked, "And what service does he provide?" "He gives really good hugs," the man answered. 59. These aren't drugs. They're my emotional support sprinkles. A man in Arizona told this to a cop who found a small bag of something very illegal in his car. He claimed he just needed a little sprinkle of joy now and then to get through the day. The officer's report allegedly noted the suspect's need for unconventional emotional support. 60. A woman in a massive SUV gets pulled over for running a stop sign. She rolls down the window, looks at the young officer, and says patronizingly, "I'm a mother. We don't have time to stop. We only have time to yield." She said it as if motherhood granted her a special exemption from the entire vehicle code. It does not. 61. A college kid in Vermont, caught with a fake ID, had a defense for the ages. He looked the bouncer-turned-cop in the eye and said, "I'm not trying to be 21. I'm method acting for a role as a guy who is 21." The sheer artistic dedication is almost noble. He was politely escorted out of the theater. 62. A man in Florida was arrested for trying to trade a live alligator for a 12-pack of beer at a convenience store. When the police showed up, his defense was simple. "It's the currency of the swamp, man." He seemed genuinely baffled that his bayou-based bartering system wasn't universally accepted. 63. Pulled over for reckless driving, a young woman in California had a truly modern excuse. "Officer, I'm sorry," she said, holding up her phone. "I was trying to take a selfie with that cute cow back there." The cop's response was a mix of fury and disbelief. "A selfie? You almost caused a 10-car pileup for a cow." 64. He hypnotized me with his deliciousness. A man shouted this in a grocery store in Illinois after being caught stuffing an entire rotisserie chicken down his pants. He claimed the chicken's aroma had put him in a trance-like state, forcing him to commit the poultry-based crime against his will. 65. A man in New York, trying to get out of a public intoxication charge, offered the arresting officer a bribe. He opened his coat and presented a live pigeon, stating, "He's very valuable. He knows his way home and has excellent credit." The cop just backed away slowly. 66. I didn't steal the car, I liberated it. This was the philosophical defense offered by a man in Oregon. He told the police that cars yearn for freedom and that he was simply a vehicle emancipation specialist. The judge was not moved by his crusade for automotive freedom and sentenced him to a brief period of human incarceration. 67. Officers respond to a noise complaint and find a man blasting heavy metal at 3 a.m. He explains, "I can't turn it down. My petunias are headbangers. They only grow to Metallica." One of the officers shines his flashlight on the flowers and says, "Sir, your petunias look more like Bon Jovi fans. Turn it down." 68. A woman in Arizona, caught speeding, tried to appeal to the officer's sense of reason. "My astrological chart said it was a favorable day for travel," she explained. "That implies speed, doesn't it?" The officer, a stoic man with no time for cosmic excuses, simply replied, "Ma'am, the only sign that matters today is the speed limit sign." 69. An officer in Louisiana asks a man why he has 3 live chickens in the front seat of his car. The man, without a hint of irony, says, "They're my designated drivers. We're experimenting to see which one is the most responsible." The level of detail in the lie is what makes it a masterpiece. 70. Police in Nevada respond to a burglary call and find a man halfway through a window. When they shout, "Freeze!" the man turns, smiles, and says, "Thank God you're here. I'm a freelance security tester. You guys have a seriously slow response time. I'll be sending you my invoice." 71. A driver in Florida, when pulled over, told the female officer, I have to be honest, I was so distracted by your beauty that I completely forgot about the speed limit. The officer, without even cracking a smile, leaned in and said, "Sir, you're going to be even more distracted by the beauty of your court summons." 72. What's the best way to explain why you have a stolen traffic cone in your living room? A student in Ohio told the police it was an ironic art installation commenting on the arbitrary nature of public authority. The officers were not impressed by his postmodern critique and made him return the art. 73. An officer in Georgia finds a man by a private pond with a fishing rod but no fish. He asks what he's doing. The man, with zen-like calm, replies, "I'm not fishing, officer. I'm teaching these worms how to swim." He then solemnly lowered a worm into the water. 74. It's okay, officer. I'm a vegan. A man in California said this after being pulled over for a DUI. He seemed to believe his dietary choices gave him a sort of moral high ground that negated his blood alcohol level. The officer calmly explained that the breathalyzer does not, in fact, have a tofu setting. 75. An elderly woman in a tiny smart car gets pulled over for doing 90 on the interstate. The state trooper, furious, yells, "Ma'am, do you have any idea how fast you were going?" She leans out the window, cups her ear, and shouts back, "You'll have to speak up, Sonny. With the windows down, I can barely hear over the wind." 76. A cop in Florida finds a man trying to push a shopping cart full of beer out of a Walmart. His excuse? "I'm not stealing it. I'm just taking it for a walk." He said it as if the 12-pack of Bud Light was his new puppy and just needed some fresh air. 77. You can't arrest me. My dog is the mayor of this town. A man in a small Colorado town actually said this during his arrest. He was referring to a golden retriever that had been given a ceremonial title. The officers were unimpressed by the claim of canine diplomatic immunity. 78. A state trooper in Texas stops a speeder. The driver's excuse was a classic blame shift. "It's not my fault, officer. I have new shoes on and they're just faster." The idea of performance-enhancing footwear for driving is a new one. I wonder if Nike knows about this. 79. I wasn't trying to burn the building down, a man explained after being caught setting a fire in an alley. I was just trying to cook a squirrel I found. He seemed more offended by the accusation of arson than proud of his urban survival skills. Both are generally frowned upon. 80. An officer in Wisconsin asks a woman why she has a live goat in the back of her convertible. She replies with total sincerity, "He's my lawnmower. We're going to a very overgrown yard." Eco-friendly? Yes. A valid passenger? The law says no. What would you even write on that ticket? 81. Caught red-handed with a stolen TV, a man in Philadelphia had an instant alibi. "I'm not stealing it. I'm just helping this TV get home. It looked lost." He portrayed himself as a good Samaritan for lost electronics. A noble but ultimately unbelievable calling. 82. A patrolman in Arizona asks the driver why he's not wearing a seatbelt. The man pats his large belly and says with a grin, "Officer, I don't need one. I've got my own airbag right here." The cop, not amused, replied, "That's great. Here's a $200 ticket for it." 83. I'm not drunk. I'm just from Australia. A man told this to a cop in California, attempting to explain his slurred speech with a terrible accent. He seemed to believe that faking a nationality would somehow negate the results of a breathalyzer test. It did not work. 84. An officer confronts a man who's been yelling at a parking meter for 10 minutes. The man, completely enraged, turns to the cop and says, "This thing just called my mother a dirty name." He was ready to defend his family's honor against an inanimate object. 85. A woman, pulled over for running a stop sign, has a unique excuse. "I'm sorry, officer, I'm a mermaid. We don't have stop signs under the sea." The cop, without missing a beat, replied, "Ma'am, I'm not with the Coast Guard. On my road, you stop. Welcome to the world of legs." 86. This isn't my car, so the drugs aren't mine either. A suspect in Florida said this while sitting in the driver's seat of the car he had just stolen. The logic is almost perfect. If you don't own the container, you don't own the contents. A true legal scholar. 87. An officer in rural Tennessee asks a man why he's covered in chicken feathers. The man sighs and admits, "I lost a bet to a chicken." He refused to elaborate further, leaving the cop to ponder what kind of high-stakes gambling goes on in the local chicken coops. 88. Pulled over for a DUI, a woman tried to explain her swerving. "I was just practicing for my video game." She seemed to think real-life driving came with a reset button and extra lives. The officer informed her that, in this game, the high score gets you a court date. 89. "I didn't steal his wallet. I was just borrowing his identity for a few hours." A man in Las Vegas offered this as a defense for pickpocketing. He framed it not as a crime, but as a sort of immersive, temporary method-acting experience. The victim was not a fan of his performance. 90. A state trooper stops a car held together with duct tape. He asks the driver if the car is safe. The driver pats the dashboard affectionately and says, "She's fine. The duct tape is just holding all her horsepower in." You have to admire the optimism, if not the engineering. 91. Cops find a man meditating on a stranger's lawn. When they ask him to leave, he explains, "I can't. My spirit guide, a raccoon named Gary, told me this specific patch of grass has premium vibrational energy. We're recharging." He seemed genuinely concerned for Gary's spiritual well-being. 92. Pulled over for speeding, a man with no cash tried to pay his fine on the spot by offering the officer a large, shiny seashell. "This is a rare Bahamian conch," he argued passionately. "It's worth at least $200 to the right person. Today is your lucky day." 93. A woman arrested for fighting explained the situation to the police like this. "She was wearing the same dress as me. One of us had to go home and change. She was being unreasonable. She saw it not as assault, but as a necessary enforcement of fashion protocol." 94. "I wasn't speeding, I was just falling with style." A young driver in California actually quoted Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story when pulled over for doing 100 miles samar. The officer, a man in his 50s, was not a fan of Pixar and gave him a ticket for flying too close to the sun. 95. A man caught siphoning gas from a police car had the single most audacious excuse. When the officer caught him, he simply said, "I figured you guys had extra." The sheer, unmitigated gall of that statement is almost breathtaking. He was right, but that's not the point. 96. An officer in Chicago asks a man why he's trying to climb the side of a skyscraper. The man, out of breath, replies, "The elevator is for quitters." He presented his dangerous and illegal act as a show of motivational grit. The police helped him find a quicker way down. 97. A woman in a minivan pulled over for erratic driving blamed it on her kids. "They were singing Baby Shark for the 30th time in a row. I wasn't swerving, I was losing my will to live." Many parents in the jury would have probably sympathized. 98. "I didn't do it. My evil twin brother who only appears when I'm drunk did it." A man in a bar fight told this to the arresting officer. He seemed to have a built-in alcohol-activated scapegoat for all his bad decisions. A convenient, if unbelievable, alibi. 99. A driver in Miami, when asked for his license, handed the officer a coupon for a free car wash. He then asked with a completely straight face, "Is this what you're looking for?" The cop, tired and defeated by the Florida heat, just sighed and said, "Just get out of the car, sir." 100. An officer stops a man for walking a toaster on a leash down the sidewalk. The man's explanation is simple and heartfelt. He thinks he's a dog. I don't have the heart to tell him. The officer kneels down, solemnly inspects the toaster, then stands up. "Sir, I appreciate that, but local leash laws are very strict. I'm gonna need you to keep your appliance under control." 101. And for our final one. A man, arrested for a DUI, was asked by the booking sergeant if he had any regrets. The man thought for a long moment, then looked up with sad eyes and said, "Yeah, I should have gotten the large fries." Some priorities, it seems, are unshakable. Well, that's 101 pieces of evidence proving the brain-to-mouth filter is apparently sold separately. The right to remain silent is free, but the entertainment from watching people ignore it is absolutely priceless. So here's the question I want you to answer in the comments. What is the absolute dumbest, most ridiculous excuse you have ever personally heard or used? Let's be honest. We've all been tempted. If you enjoyed this festival of bad decisions, destroy that like button and subscribe for more dives into human absurdity. We'll see you in the next one.